Hello friends and welcome back. I hope step one went well for you. If you haven't watched that video yet, please do. How to take a great photo for your charcoal portrait. Our next step is to prepare and graph our paper. Remember that our goal in this project is to break things down step by step. And to do so, we're going to look one square at a time at your reference image and draw one square at a time. It allows us to really study carefully the shapes and the forms on our face. So in order to do that, we need to graph some paper. You will need a ruler, a mechanical pencil, and some good drawing paper to do this. I'll show you how to make a 1.5-inch grid and a 2-inch grid on two different types of setups. Take your time, pause this video often so that you can stay on step with me, and really make sure that you focus on precise measurement and lines, as well as drawing really lightly when you draw your grid, because you don't want to have a finished product with these heavy lines from a grid going across it. Our goal in the end is for people not to be able to see that grid at all. So take your time, be careful, and I'll see you in a bit. It is time to start graphing our drawing paper. I have a mechanical pencil, I have a long metal ruler, I have my photo printed out that's been pre-gridded as I showed in my first demo video for this project. I'm going to show you two different routes for setting up your paper. The first route is what I do for myself as an artist when I draw, and it's what I have my students do when we're in person. When we draw, we want to make sure that we keep our paper really nice. So we set up our drawings like this. We put our paper that we're going to draw on onto a drawing board. A drawing board is any flat, textureless surface. So this is just a piece of birch wood purchased from NASCO that I tape to. I use masonite at home. You want something that just doesn't have a texture. I've put the paper down pretty square on my board, and then I've gone around and I've taped all the edges down. And I've tried to tape carefully so my tape runs with the paper, not crooked to it, because it'll make it, if my tape goes off at an angle when I'm drawing my portrait, everything will seem off just because those edges are off. It's important to tape all the edges of your paper. Otherwise, when you're drawing and you're moving things around, you might catch a corner here or there. So every once in a while I have a student that just wants to tack down the corners. Please don't do that if you're using a drawing board. Tape all the way around, tape carefully. Then I have a piece of tag board, or a thicker, cheaper paper that I have taped on one end of the board, and this is what we call our cover sheet. And we can open and close it, and it protects our paper here. Great craftsmanship means you take care of your paper. If you don't have a drawing board, like my students that are online right now, and you're working with a drawing pad, what you're gonna do is open up your drawing pad. You're going to skip that first page in your drawing pad, and you are going to draw instead on the second page. I also give my students at home a piece of tracing paper. So this is just a large piece of really smooth tracing paper. We're going to keep that tracing paper over our drawing whenever we close up our drawing pad, and this will help so that the paper doesn't rub on your drawing and smush your charcoal around. So always keep that tracing paper over your work in your drawing pad. Your first step in graphing is to set up your margins. So in my printed photo, my margins are these white spaces around the edge of my photograph. I want to have a little space around the edge of my drawing on my drawing paper. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to think about this piece of paper as it's going to be in a drawing format. So my drawing is long. So this is going to be the top of my page. This is going to be the left side, right side, and bottom. On the top of my page, I'm going to line my ruler up with the edge of my paper, which is right here, okay, underneath that tape. So I'm going to line up the edge of the ruler with the edge of the paper, and I'm going to draw one dark line all the way across. I'm going to do the same going down the left side of my piece, and again, my drawing is oriented in this direction, so left side is here. Okay, these are my margins. This is my zero mark. When I'm drawing with my ruler, I'm going to do some measurements now. And I need to know where I'm going to put the zero on my ruler. On the rulers we use at school, and this is the same ruler I have at home, it's a Westcott, it has a cork backing, really nice ruler. The zero is tucked in from the end. So I'm going to put the zero on that mark, And I'm gonna make a 1.5 inch grid on this piece. I'm gonna do a 2-inch grid on my larger paper. So I'm going to make a light mark on that margin line. Okay, so that's where I'm measuring, is on the margin line. A light mark at 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, 12, 13.5, 15, all the way down to the bottom. I'm at 16.5 right at the edge of my paper. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my ruler straight up to the other side. So I'm going to keep this 0 mark right on that margin, and I'm going to make my next set of marks right on that tape edge. Usually I would stand up and lean over my page when I'm doing this because I can look and see the lines a little clearer. I can't do that right now for the camera, but if you're at home, stand up, look straight down. Once I have those marks set up, I'm going to use them as a guide to grid my drawing. There's a few mistakes that students make in this process. One is they don't always line up their 0 in the same spot. So they'll line up their 0 here, and then they'll flip their ruler around and line it up over here. The problem with that is you're most likely not going to have things line up exactly, and your lines are going to get crooked. So always make sure that your 0 mark starts on the same line, that you're just moving your ruler up and down your page. You're not flipping your ruler or flipping your paper. The other thing that they sometimes mess up with, and I do too, is measurement. So I did a 1.5 inch grid. I've done this enough that I've kind of memorized what 1.5 plus 1.5 plus 1.5, et cetera, is. So I'll make sure to write down those measurements on the video for you. Take your time, measure correctly, and measure accurately. The next mistake that students make is they draw their grid really dark. There's 2 problems with that. If you draw your grid really dark, you're not going to be able to get rid of the grid later in the drawing. So you're always going to see those grid lines. And the second problem with it is you'll dent your paper. So even if you do get rid of the grid line, you're going to have a hard time marking over it. There'll be an indent, and you'll be like a detective, and you'll be drawing, and all of a sudden this line appears that doesn't darken. So when you're doing this next step, when you're connecting all these lines, I'm suggesting that you use a mechanical pencil and that you hold it really, really lightly. Your other option would be to use a graphite drawing pencil like a 2H, and again, hold it really lightly. You want this grid to be so light you can barely see it, as light as you can possibly draw, so do not push in this step. You're gonna stand up over your paper. You're going to align your ruler mark to mark, and then you've got to hold your ruler tight and super lightly, I'm not going to push it on, I'm going to hold my pencil light, you're going to go across the page. And then you just keep doing that all the way down your paper. Once that step's done, I need to do the same measurements in the opposite direction. So I'm going to align my ruler with this top edge here, 0 mark on my margin, right on this little intersection, and I'm going to make a mark every 1.5 inches. Then I'll pull my ruler straight down my page to the bottom, and either on this bottom line here or on my tape line, I'm going to make my measurements across at 1.5 inches. I just want to make sure that my 0 lines up with my original 0 on that margin. And then just like before, I'm going to connect my dots, making sure to line my ruler up really carefully, holding it tight, and then really lightly and loosely drawing that grid. The last step in drawing your grid is you want to make it into like a battleship, okay? So the game Battleship, you have a grid system, and to find the coordinates, you use letters and numbers to organize yourself. So we're going to do the same here and on my printed photo. I don't want to write anything on top of my drawing paper at this point, because if I write A, B, C, D on this, I might dent the paper underneath. So I'm going to move this out of the way, or use the paper, and I'm going to label my grids across the top. Right in the center of each square, an alphabet letter. And down the sides, numbers. Then I'm going to do the same on my drawing. Okay, I want to make sure it orients the same. So on the outside of my margin, the letters, and down the side, numbers. And if you look, I've got 9 squares in my drawing, or in my photograph, and I've got 11 here. These are just extra squares. If that confuses you, you could always darken in this line here underneath 9. Same with H. H is my last square. I could darken in that line there, just if it confuses you. This is just extra paper. Don't worry about it. At this point, you are ready to start drawing. So I'm going to put this paper away and wait for the next demo to show you that. Meanwhile, I want to show you some variations that you can do on the grid on this bigger notebook paper. On the bigger paper, we still need to make a margin, and we're going to do that just a little bit differently than we did on the drawing board. So I'm going to come into this. My paper has a tiny little perforated line right here, so that if I do a drawing, I can pull it easily out of the sketchbook. I'm going to line my ruler up on that tiny little perforation, and this is where I'm going to make my margin line on my big paper. Okay, and then I'm going to line my ruler up on the edge of my paper down here, and then make my margin line like so. So just a little bit different than with my smaller drawing paper. I'm going to do a 2-inch grid on this. So I'm going to make a mark every 2 inches, top, bottom, left, right, and I'll connect those. Again, I'm going to make sure my 0 aligns. I'm going to pull straight up to the opposite side. I'm going to stand up so I get a good view here, align my 0 mark, and connect. Then I'm going to make my 2-inch marks going across the page, lining up my 0 on the margin, pulling my ruler straight down to the opposite end, lining it up on the margin line again. Standing up, I'm going to connect my lines across. And last step, we battleship our paper so that it matches our portrait. If you don't have a printer and you can't print out your reference image, you can still do this. You can open up your image in like a Google Doc or Preview or something that you can draw over or add text boxes to your image, and you can still get the ability to add this kind of information. Once I'm done here, I'm ready for the next step, which is to do the contour line drawing of my face on my grid. Wait for the next video to see how to do that. I'm going to take you through it one step at a time, and we're going to work our way down the drawing. A good use of your time right now, if you have extra time, is to just take this portrait, look at it, open up your sketchbook, and practice drawing the different facial features. Pay careful attention to the shapes of the nose, the eyes, the mouth, the jawline, the ear. Maybe play with drawing hair and fiddling around with that as well, so that you're prepared when we come to the next step. When you put drawing paper away and it's in a sketchbook, make sure you use a piece of tracing paper in between that drawing and the page above it. It'll just keep your paper nicer. Good luck, have fun, take it slow, be precise, and above all, draw super, super light.